Put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in my shoes. From a young age, my parents would say that to me a lot. Back then, I found it annoying, and my immediate thoughts would be, I am, or I'm trying. However, as I grew older, I found out that I was not. I realized that when they said that to me, I put up a barrier due to my annoyance of how repetitious it became, that I missed the whole point of the saying. I lacked empathy. I still lack empathy, but the difference now is that I'm trying. The power a person holds to empathize with another is an extraordinary human trait. However, is that empathy full? Is it with good intent? Are you saying you feel for another because it seems like the right thing to do? Or do you actually care to take on that burden? These questions can be both overwhelming and confusing, but they are important in deciding how you truly feel. Let me just say here and now, feelings do matter. Empathy matters. Empty empathy is a problem that no one seems to want to fix, but the bridge to a better world relies on empathy. There are 3 types of empathy. We'll start with emotional empathy, when you take on the emotions of another. Great friendships rely on emotional empathy in order to see your friend as someone deeper. Working to keep emotional empathy in check helps build stronger bonds and make the friendship more resilient. The second type of empathy is cognitive empathy, when you put yourself in someone else's shoes. While all types of empathy require that second level or second look towards a situation, cognitive empathy is carried by a more logical brain response to what you are seeing. For example, not only seeing, but trying to feel the connection between the emotions and the decisions of others. Asking yourself, why is she acting so timid around him? Or what really happened to make him that angry? You can never fully know what someone else is thinking. Your brain is your own at the end of the day. But making a conscious effort to use cognitive empathy in your daily life is important. The third type of empathy is compassionate empathy, feeling the pain and taking steps to help. For example, let's say your friend's cat just passed away. The likelihood of you being as close with that cat as they were is slim. But instead of just saying, I'm sorry for your loss, you can use compassionate empathy to help mourn with them. Tell them a story about a time that you lost a pet. Let them know that mourning takes time, but that it will get better. All of these types of empathy, when felt wholeheartedly, allow for a sense of caring and community. But empathy can be faked, and sadly, empathy has become almost a trend. We've created an online world in which we see and share with the tap of a button. The more views and likes a post gets is great in generating awareness, but does not necessarily lead to true support. My generation in particular knows the influence of online trends, and sadly, many real struggles have been masked behind a short TikTok video. Due to digital media being a fairly new thing, not many studies have been conducted. However, the National Institute for Health states that digital communications are devoid of many of the emotional signals and cues that are experienced in face-to-face settings, which often leads to more impersonal interactions. Educating yourself through digital media is a step in the right direction, but due to these impersonal connections and often masked motives, it can be hard to find that genuine empathy that we should strive for. This is where empty empathy comes into play. Professor E.Ann Kaplan of the State University of New York defines empty empathy as the emotional response to images of suffering and news coverage that is provided without sufficient context or background to understand the causes of the suffering. In other words, empty empathy is when a person cannot, will not, and or does not empathize or respond in an appropriate manner to suffering. The media can be a scare realm to many. We are caught in a constant cycle of news. Studies from the University of Rochester now show that compassion fatigue explains this phenomenon. We are constantly bombarded with tragic stories and eventually get emotionally worn out. People start to feel less and less connected to these issues simply because they want to label the other person as a racist, sexist, or bigot. This is not empathy. Labeling others is not empathy. The online world has created this new form of empathy, virtual empathy, and that is becoming the new norm. Understanding real empathy's purpose and importance is becoming lost. I want to discuss why it matters. Why empty empathy is something that everyone should be aware and care about. Imagine you're Mr. Softy and you watch a kid drop his ice cream cone. Your first response might be, I feel sorry for him. That is sympathy. Sympathy is when you feel sorry for someone. Empathy is when you feel with someone. Feel their struggles, support the betterment of their lives, to be a good friend, neighbor, ally, someone who they can rely on. I can relate this to the kid with an ice cream cone by giving it a second thought. I can think to myself, what if that was my ice cream cone? That may seem like a silly thing, because it's just an ice cream cone, right? But to that kid, it is so much more. Let's take this analogy a step further. 2020 alone has given us an abundance of reasons why we need to feel with someone. From battles of racial discrimination to a toxic political atmosphere led by the COVID-19 pandemic, the world needs empathy. We need to take initiative to care. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered by police officers in Minneapolis due to a knee at his throat. His death brought upon waves of support for the Black Lives Matter movement. What started as protests to bring justice to his death being yet another example of police brutality soon morphed into tackling the ever-present battle of systemic racism in our country. While I am not a person of color, I can and will stand with my brothers and sisters that are. I work to be that ally because now is not the time to sit down, to simply feel sorry for someone. We need to feel with someone. We also need to recognize that this is a lot more than a what if that was me situation. We cannot be colorblind. We need to recognize that racism is an issue. Austin Channing Brown, an inspirational woman of color, says in her book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness, that reconciliation is not about white feelings. It's about diverting power and intentions to be oppressed toward the powerless. It's not enough to double at diversity and inclusion while leaving the existing authority structure in place. Reconciliation demands more. Reconciliation, simply put, is making things right. Recognizing racism instead of trying to cover it up with diversity is making things right. For example, film companies owning up that they produce racist content, so just trying to push for more diverse cast. Diversity is important. Inclusion is a must, but you cannot make the past disappear. Like Austin Channing Brown said, reconciliation demands more. Empathy demands more. Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds say in their book, Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, You, that there are 3 types of people when it comes to race: segregationists, assimilationists, and anti-racists. Segregationists are haters, like real haters, people who hate you for not being like them. Assimilationists are people who like you, but only like you, meaning they like you because you're like them. And there are anti-racists. They love you because you're like you. The world is not perfect. They know that. We cannot fit into little cookie-cutter molds. Racism is embedded into our society whether we like it or not. Racism is taught, and like many things, it can take a lot to be undone. But it is not like a law of physics. It is not absolute. It is not enough to be not racist. We have to be anti-racist. Sympathy is not racist. Empathy is anti-racist. The bridge to a better world relies on this empathy. That being said, empathy is only useful when recognized and acted upon in a meaningful way. To put it simply, we can't half-ass it. Empathy is something that must be learned because despite natural human instincts to care, many factors in our society limit and skew our emotions and perceptions. A good thing to keep in mind when striving to be more meaningfully empathetic is to know yourself before you try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Another thing social media has led us to do is hide behind a screen and again, follow the trends. To be most genuine, you must know your own beliefs. That being said, you also need to know when to put those beliefs aside when you see others in need. Do not let your stubbornness be the reason you leave someone to suffer. As Desmond Tutu once said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Now is not the time to be silent. Sign petitions, spread awareness, recognize the importance of these issues, call out racism, speak up, speak out. Live your life with the words of the wise Angela Davis by saying, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Thank you.